grateful that you guys are taking your time out for this. It is an important topic. I've been working with Shattuck for several years now, but we've never really done a talk on nutrition strategies for mood, mind, and mental health, which we all know. And I would say this literally is the perfect time of year for it. I mean, by the time we get to February, it's it's been cold and dark and there's always this stress and maybe you've been ill and all those things. So we're just going to really talk about what are the strategies, what are the foundational things we can do nutrition wise to make that difference, because we are putting in biochemical information and our body is responding to it. So we're going to talk about what can we put in that is a positive response. Um, Also, feel free, like we're gonna have Q&A after this too. So if you need to just put a question in the chat now so that you remember it, feel free to do that because I know I forget my questions. So put that in there and then I'll look at the chat when we're done. So we're gonna do nutrition strategies for mood, mind, and mental health. I am Christina Meyer-Jacks. I am one of the co-founders of A4 Health. So that's my business partner, Jenna. And she and I, along with some other dietitians, work with a variety of organizations, but most especially sports teams and schools like Shattuck. So Jenna works with the Wild and the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I work with the San Jose Sharks and the United States Performance Center, which is Olympic athletes. And I also teach, so I'm also a professor. But enough about me for sure. What are we going to discuss today? So we're going to set it up talking about factors that affect the body and mind connection. So what is all involved? Because it isn't obviously just nutrition. But then how does gut health affect mental health and mood? And honestly, that is the most important thing we can talk about. If we get the gut right, we're going to get the brain right. And it feels like a weird connection, but it's absolutely the truth. So we'll talk about gut health quite a bit tonight. And then nutrition habits that can negatively affect our mind, and then nutrition strategies, whether it's food, timing, supplements that can positively affect our mood, mind, and mental health. But there is no doubt that what we put in our body has a direct correlation to both our cognitive function and our psychological function. It's been proven in research over and over again. So it does make a difference if you do get this right. And it's not a one size fits all answer. So we'll get into that too. So, what are the factors that affect mood and mental health? Well, there is this gut brain axis, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like. It's definitely more than just food. There are some other factors, right? So, biological, right? So, your genetics, your brain chemistry, your hormone changes can affect your mental health, certain medical conditions, and then obviously substance abuse. Then there's psychological too. So, childhood experiences, your personality, how you cope with things, cognitive patterns. Yes, those are all going to play a role in it. Your social and environmental too, life stressors, school stress, societal expectations, and then social support. So all of those things are going to be a factor. And then the fact, I'm going to skip down to 5, life stage, right? Adolescence. You guys, there's so much going on at this stage. It's quite really amazing how well all of you do cope with what's being thrown at you at any given day. So the first thing that I want to say here is yay you, and yay you for taking this time out to go, all right, and now what are the steps that I could do to make this even better for myself? And so lifestyle is where we're going to spend most of our time tonight. So we're going to talk about sleep, exercise, diet, and how all of those really impact your mental health. I probably won't spend a ton of time on exercise because many of you on this call are student athletes. So you're getting plenty of physical activity, but movement and nature and taking pauses and having some mindfulness time where you're not holding your phone, you're not letting media just flood into your life. Those are also really important tools for you to have a positive lift to your mood and to your mental health. All right. I don't know why it's not going to the next slide. All right, here we go. Is that the next slide? No? Okay. I don't know why it always goes backwards. Sorry, I'm gonna go out of this. I'm gonna escape and then go back to the slide I need. I don't know why it goes backwards, but it does. All right. So let's look at gut health and mental health. So they really do go hand in hand, that gut-brain axis. It really is a two-way system, two-way communication system from our digestive system through our nervous system, so all the way up to our brain and our spinal cord. So many of you have heard of this neurotransmitter called serotonin, and that's a key player in this mood and mental health game. It helps regulate our sleep, our appetite, our moods, and it also helps to inhibit pain. So when our serotonin levels are good, all of those are on the positive end, right? Good sleep, good appetite, good mood, and then good pain management. 95% of serotonin is produced in your gut. And it's highly influenced by the good for you bacteria. So if you hear the word probiotics, it's basically talking about the good for you bacteria. So there are billions of bacteria that are in our body and most specifically in our gut. And there's also all this neural pathway, tons of neurons that are in our intestines. And the interaction between those neurotransmitters, the other metabolites that are produced by the good for you bacteria, they literally have a direct correlation up to our brain, how we're thinking, so our cognitive function and our mood. So getting serotonin right, making sure we have a healthy gut so we're producing serotonin is super important. So how do we get good for you bacteria in there? We're going to keep unraveling that as we go on, but having good gut health is the foundation to this. So what feeds the probiotics or the good for you bacteria? Prebiotic fiber. So that is what you mostly get from plants. You can get it from fermented foods as well. So like yogurts and sauerkraut and kefir and kimchi, certain foods like that. But you can get fiber a lot from fruits and vegetables. You can obviously get it from nuts and seeds as well. There are fiber supplements out there too. I really do encourage people to eat their fiber versus using fiber supplements, but we can talk about when maybe that needs to go into play. But the gut microbiome can produce important metabolites that influence those serotonin levels, and then they interact with the millions of nerve cells in our gut, sending direct messages up to our brain. So changes in that gut microbiome and that gut bacteria can have a huge effect on mental health and behavior. It's actually bi-directional too. So that means our gut health can play an impact on obviously our digestive system, but also on our mental health. And so when you think about taking a stimulant, so caffeine, let's say that you take caffeine, and caffeine is a stimulant that stimulates your nervous system. Well, that two-way direction is then sometimes you have to go to the bathroom more because you're getting that stimulant effect from your nervous system down to all those neurons in your gut, which makes you have to go to the bathroom. So what are factors that affect our gut? As you can see, there's dietary patterns. And again, when we talk about the factors that affect mental health, no, that's why I set it up in the beginning. It's way more than just lifestyle, but we're spending most of our time talking about lifestyle here, but it's all encompassing. But the diet quality, do you have a diet that is quality? So does it have processed ingredients and low fiber? That is not going to help grow those good for you bacteria. And the other thing that it can do is it can cause inflammation. So the typical Western diet where it's fried foods, lots of processed ingredients, look at a food label. If you don't recognize a lot of the ingredients on there, a lot of those things, if your body doesn't recognize it, it's going to cause an inflammatory response because your body is trying to address it, get rid of it because it doesn't understand it. And that inflammation can affect your gut health. It can cause what's called leaky gut. So if you've got a lot of inflammation in your intestines because it's constantly getting irritated, there can be these little tiny breaks in your intestinal lining, and then you can get things that aren't supposed to be floating around in your bloodstream floating around in your bloodstream, which can then cause mood and mental health changes, amongst other issues that can go on there. But factors that affect gut health, drugs and alcohol certainly can. So that can even be medications, can affect your intestinal lining and what bacteria is growing down there. Food sensitivities. So if you have an undiagnosed food sensitivity, this is not a food allergy. This is like something where you get an immune response to a food, and maybe it's gluten, maybe it's dairy, and you eat those foods and you just know it's causing you stomach upset, like you just don't feel good. You have other things where maybe you feel fatigue, brain fog, just really weighed down. This can be because your body is having a food sensitivity, overreacts, has an immune response, and that high level of inflammation can really affect how your brain is functioning and working, and what neurotransmitters are sending what messages to your brain. There's other things too, whether it's stress quantity and the management of that stress. Are you sleeping good? Are you getting at least 7 hours of sleep? Most of you guys are exercising frequently. Other things that affect gut health are medications such as omeprazole, which is given to people who have like heartburn or stomach upset. They've got different names, but like brand names to it, but the drug is actually called omeprazole, and it's a proton pump inhibitor. So it's supposed to decrease the amount of gastric acid that you have. That's not amazing. And while you may get a small like benefit where you don't have as much heartburn or maybe a little less stomach upset, it actually causes you to have less gastric acid in your stomach, and that less gastric acid plays a role negatively in growing bad for you bacteria in your gut versus good for you bacteria. So it's not my favorite. It was only ever meant to be given to people for like 2 weeks at a time, but some people are on them for a really long time. So I could talk more about that if you want down the road here. But also, things that can affect gut health are infections, right? So if you have any kind of infection, that can affect your gut health. And then typically you end up having to take antibiotics, and antibiotics will wipe out all of your good bacteria in your gut. So now we've got this blank slate, and we've got to try to feed it the good bacteria again and get that populated. So we'll talk about what that looks like. So mood boosting foods, how do they work? Well, our whole goal is to boost levels of serotonin, right? So that calming brain chemical. And we want to reduce cortisol and adrenaline, and these are our stress hormones. And especially if we're stressed out a lot, if we're running high anxiety a lot, we produce more and more of this cortisol and adrenaline. And that can be really, eventually, you're running so high all the time that it makes a huge level of anxiety. So we want to switch it over to getting to higher levels of serotonin to help counteract that. And good sleep patterns are going to be one of those things that help with it. But mood boosting foods will also help your immune system work better, lowers blood pressure, and even when you're young, having a lower blood pressure is important, and can also keep your blood sugar nice and even. And you want that too, because having a roller coaster where your blood sugar is going up and down, whether if you're not eating enough and your blood sugar drops too low, or you eat too much sugary or high carbohydrate food and it goes too high, this roller coaster of blood sugar can absolutely affect mood, whether you're hangry, angry, irritated, all those things. So we want to keep blood sugar more even. So let's start with prebiotics and probiotics because we were talking about that with gut health and how the gut affects the mood. So we definitely want to get more fiber in our diet, right? So we talk about prebiotics. They reinforce the growth and activity of the probiotic bacteria. And they also produce short chain fatty acids, which help our immune system. So it modulates our response to infection. Uh, Probiotics then are obviously the desirable bacteria. They can also inhibit the harmful bacteria from building up in the gut, causing inflammation and causing harm. So that's the thing, right? We don't want too much of the bad for you bacteria because that causes inflammation, and then that will cause the wrong metabolites to go from that gut brain axis and have higher levels of cortisol and adrenaline and all of those things. And if you've got high levels of the bad for you bacteria, it can drive more cravings for sugar, and processed foods, and it becomes this vicious cycle. So what do we want to do? We want to get more fiber. The recommendations are over here. For males, 38 grams a day, females, 25 grams a day. I'd be super happy if you guys like did a food tracker one day and you figured out that you're getting at least 15 to 20. If you got that, you'd be doing a lot better than most people are doing. So again, getting your fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds. Now you can take a probiotic as well to go along with that prebiotic fiber. We'll talk a little bit more about brands, but you really want to get a good amount, right? So CFUs, so it says 10 to 20 million, by the way. So it's our colony forming units per day. And that really can only happen in a supplement. But it is important to eat foods that also promote that, right? So you can see some examples here. Again, if you don't have access to a lot of fermented foods, you can store them in your fridge in your dorms, and you can add them to snacks and things like that too. Or you can bring it along with you when you're eating at the cafeteria, the dining hall. So this is there are a lot of probiotics out there, and I can talk about that. This isn't a perfect science, by the way, either. So I'm not going to say here's one probiotic, it's going to have all the strains that you need. No, we don't really know that yet. We know that some are better than others. This is one that I use with the San Jose Sharks. It's NSF certified for sports, approved for sports. So I like it. It's got 20 billion CFUs in it. It's tolerated well by my players. And I recommend usually that people take one capsule at night, about 4 to 5 times per week. You don't need to take it every day. It's good to take it at night. You're going to go rest. It'll allow it to have less gastric acid moving around. So the goal is that you get more of those in your intestine. You should always take a probiotic after antibiotic use, and you should always eat the foods with fiber when you're taking it as well, so that they work in synergy together. So we talk about lifestyle, right? They always intertwine. And sleep is fundamental for mental health. They like, so how do you sleep better? So many sleep hygiene things, right? Obviously, I'm the dietitian here, so I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about the nutrition component of it too. Being mindful of how much we use our technology late at night is also extremely helpful. But let's talk about the nutrition part for a content mind. So caffeine has a half-life of about 4 to 6 hours. So that means if you take 200 milligrams of caffeine, you're still going to have, it circulating around in your body, and for some people even longer than that, just because they metabolize it different. I usually recommend not having it at least 4 hours before you're going to go to bed. I know that it's hard with several of you with sports because you have late night games and you're taking caffeine before that game to pump you up, and then you're going to try to go to sleep. I know because we put sleep packs together for our hockey players. So they get off the ice, they're usually done around 10:30 or 11. Many of our players will take the little sleep packs, which I'll talk about in a little bit. What is that? Because they do take caffeine before the game. Now, they try, and I talked to a lot of players about this, on non-game days, there's no reason for them to be doing caffeine, you know, anytime after like 12 noon. So they really try not to do that. Some are better than others, I think. And then heavy meals before bed. That's also hard if you have a late game and I know that you're super hungry. But in essence, that if you have a really heavy meal before you go to bed, it can really disrupt your sleep patterns. High fat meals late in the day can do that too. Sometimes people are affected by spicy foods, not everybody. But then going to bed overly hungry too. So you don't want to go to bed hungry. That's also going to affect your quality of sleep. And for student athletes, it's going to affect your recovery. It's going to affect how well you play the next day. So don't go to bed hungry. That's not a good mechanism. And then in general, we'll talk more specifics in a little bit, but adding these nutrients into your diet: magnesium, potassium, calcium, melatonin from food sources. I am not a fan of taking melatonin supplements because your body makes melatonin. You can get melatonin from food as well. And when we take melatonin supplements, our body gets used to it and our body will stop making it on its own. And we start getting very dependent on it and we have to start taking more and more of it. So I'd rather see everybody try to get it from food sources, especially the tart cherry juice, just because it's condensed, so it's an easy way to get it in a small quantity. Obviously, staying hydrated is going to help with sleep and all of your mental function. Our brains rely heavily on having adequate hydration to think properly. And then protein. Sorry, hold on. So protein makes, and certain ones have more than others, but tryptophan, which is a really calming amino acid. So seeds, nuts, turkey, things like that can be really, really calming. And then B6 as well, which really affects mood. And it's definitely one of those vitamins that is part of neurotransmitter production. These are, again, this is just a prettier picture of foods to improve sleep. If you can have dairy, dairy has tryptophan in it. It produces serotonin and melatonin, which improves sleep. So you've probably heard of people having like warm milk drinks before they go to bed, and that's one of the reasons that they do it. But herbal teas are really great, tart cherry juice, and then some of those other items that I mentioned before. So overall, like when we're looking at nutrition and we're looking at not just mood and mental health, but also cognition, these are basically this is the great checklist of it all, right? So higher carb foods because they're going to have a calming effect. So we're not talking about sugar, we're talking about quality. So starchy veggies, rice, sweet potatoes, things like that. If you have that before bed, can promote sleep. Also protein, right? Having some protein along with a carb may promote sleep quality as well. And then diets low in calories decrease immune cells and response and lower sleep quality and stress management neurotransmitters. So you really don't want to sell yourself short on calories. You are putting a lot out there and your body needs to recover. It's the building blocks for your neurotransmitters and for your sleep and recovery. Diets high in sugar and processed fats negatively affect sleep quality, and they also lead to inflammation and can irritate gut lining. So, not amazing, definitely not amazing before you go to bed. We'll talk about supplements on the next slide. Hydration, obviously, all cells run better hydrated. And then whole foods, like really concentrate on eating whole foods for gut health because when we eat a lot of processed foods, again, it really irritates our gut lining, which is absolutely going to affect our mental function. Limiting caffeine, alcohol, sugar, and processed foods, always a smart choice, but especially when we're talking about mental health. I know some athletes run on really high caffeine and sugar levels, and there is always a mental crash to it. And there's an adrenaline rush as you're doing it until there's the crash. And so that roller coaster ride of highs and lows with caffeine and sugar ultimately has diminishing returns and is not going to help mood or mental function. And I really, you guys we could talk about different brands, things like that. But, for that quiet time at the end of the night, herbal teas, functional mushroom teas, all those things that don't have caffeine, but have healthy properties and adaptogens that can really relax you and help you go to sleep. So supplements to consider. It's kind of this is my checklist. This is the list I love. Obviously, this is getting recorded and Joe can share these slides too. One of my favorite brands is Thorne. It's just because they have a lot of NSF approved for sport. They're high quality supplements. There are other ones out there too, so feel free to reach out and ask me or ask me questions here too. But supplements to consider. I'm definitely a foods first dietitian. I've got that over here. always check with a doctor or a dietitian if you have questions. For the most part, check with a dietitian. A lot of doctors aren't trained in this. They don't get a lot of nutrition education, but doctors will know if you've got medical conditions that you wouldn't want to take these things. And then look for NSF approved supplements as much as possible. Get used to that. Many of you want to go on and play at the collegiate level and or the Olympic level, and that's going to be super important to make sure that you've got third-party tested supplements. But vitamin D3 and K2, mood and immune system. You're in Minnesota. It's winter. If you're not taking a vitamin D3 that has K2 as part of it, I know that you're not getting enough vitamin D, and I know that you're probably deficient, and it really does affect mood and immune function. So that's that's kind of a no-brainer for everybody. I'm a big fan of methylated B complex of vitamins. So if they're methylated, they're absorbed better. There's a good amount of people who don't absorb non-methylated B vitamins, and you could go get tested for that, but you don't really have to because if you take a methylated one, it absorbs well for everyone. It'll help with energy, metabolism, and mood. Thorne's got one that's called Methyl Guard Plus. That's one of my favorites. We put it in our daily pack for our athletes. And then here's when I was talking about like, what's the sleep pack, Christina? So the sleep pack that we give our athletes, um, some only get magnesium glycinate, and I really do recommend magnesium glycinate for a lot of people. 200 to 300 milligrams. You take it at night. It's very calming. It's part of 300 metabolic processes in our body, and most of us don't get enough magnesium in the foods that we eat. Now, the sleep pack, so this should help relax you, and it helps a lot of people sleep well, helps with mood and mental function. But if you need to sleep a little bit more, you can add these two other supplements, which are GABA and L-theanine, if sleep is a challenge. So you do the magnesium, one GABA, one L-theanine. It's like the night-night pack. And again, Thorne is the brand that we use for those. Tart cherry juice, it's a great source of melatonin. Avoid taking straight melatonin, like I mentioned before, but if you're making smoothies at night, some of my athletes, to help them calm, relax, get in a good mental state, will make a nighttime recovery smoothie where they add tart cherry juice in it. There's actually magnesium glycinate powder that you can get through Thorne. And if you can have dairy, they add some dairy in there, and that just ends up being a real calming end of the day thing. Omega-3 fatty acids are amazing for gut health and for general decreasing inflammation. And they're the building blocks of a lot of mood enhancing compounds in your body as well. Neurotransmitters, hormones, things like that. And then probiotics, like I mentioned before. So all of these, there are other ones out there, and I'm happy to answer questions related to them. But these are the biggies that I think are foundational for mood, mind, and mental health. So in a nutshell, how do we boost mental health through better nutrition? Eat a balanced diet is the most boring way to say this, but really what it's saying is avoid processed food and eat whole foods, making sure that you get fiber in your diet. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, junk, caffeine, sugar, no wonder your brain is going all over the place because you're not giving it any building blocks for the good for you bacteria that help build positive neurotransmitters. You're giving it a negative roller coaster, dopamine hits, which just keep you kind of on this like craving and addictive path, high cortisol levels, high adrenaline levels. So you really do want to limit sugar, caffeine, take it when you need it, like during a game or like right before a game, but not habitually all the time, right? Stay hydrated, incorporate some fermented foods, so yogurts, sauerkraut, kimchi, those brain boosting supplements that I talked about. Practice mindful eating too. So that just means really being intentional about your food. You can socialize with people, but put your phone down. Try not to eat in a stressful way because it affects your gut health and how well your body digests and absorbs that food, which ultimately will affect your brain. Right now you might not be able to prepare a lot of meals, but that's a relaxing process as part of it. But certainly plan it out. look at what's being offered in the dining hall, or if you're traveling on trips where you're going to restaurants, and be really mindful about what you're picking. Try not to pick in a hot state where you're just like starving and you're just like anything that sounds good. And obviously mental health, like this is all foundational. But if you're really in a tough spot, you can work to get there, but you may need obviously professional guidance to help you in acute situations. All right. I got through that pretty quick. Hopefully, we've got some time here for some questions. Let me look at